the worst year for a lot of us for our mental as well as physical health. So joining us this morning is best-selling author, coach, and fitness expert, Lisa Goldenthal.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa G, your host. You're at the top of your game, yet the game is changing faster than ever. Strategies that got you here aren't the ones that'll keep you here. The pressure is relentless and the fear of obsolescence looms large. That's why I'm here. Welcome to the new podcast series, Disrupted: How to Be Gritty and Unlock Performance. This is your chance where I sit down with today's top experts in business, mindset, wellness, and success to help you master disruption and thrive.
Thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon.
She's an expert on business transformation strategy and disruptive leadership, the New York Times bestselling author of 6 books, including her latest, The Disruption Mindset. She's working on her next book on AI. She's advised hundreds of top companies from Adobe, Southwest Airlines, and worked with 49 of the Fortune 100 companies. Previously, she was a founder, CEO of the disruptive analyst firm Altimeter Group and chief research officer at PA Consulting. She's a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Business School and was named one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company. Welcome to the podcast, Charlene Li.
Hi, thanks very much for having me.
Well, it was very impressive, and I've been following you for a long time, so thank you for being here. I know that you are a master of disruption, so I wanted to talk to you on that topic. Of course, I'm obsessed with AI, so we can go there too, but let's jump into why do we need to master disruption right now?
Well, I think disruption is a fact of life, and we are being disrupted by so many things: economics, technology, things like AI, the political system. There are just so many things disrupting our lives. So we need to be good at managing and having disruption in our lives. But we also, I think, need to disrupt the way we do things every day. And I try to work in some way of disrupting myself, getting myself out of my comfort zone every single day so that I continue to grow and change and evolve.
Well, I really like that about you, first of all, because I started this podcast in 2020 because I was disrupted and I knew it was hard for people. It was hard for me when doing things the way that we thought we had to do them wasn't even possible anymore. We all had to pivot. And at the same time, disruption keeps happening. So it isn't going away. So do you have some strategies, tips, or tools for our audience on how they can master disruption and not let it take them down?
Sure. I think this is the reason why I wrote my book, The Disruption Mindset, because people kept asking me, so how do you be disruptive? How do you actually thrive with it rather than be like destroyed by it? And there is a mindset around people who look at disruption as an opportunity for change. And so they don't look at disruption as a negative force. The reality is these are things that are happening. And there are always winners and losers. And so how do you move over to the winner side and not be on the loser side? It's really about looking at how you look at it. So the people who are really good at disruptions run towards it, seek it out, actually create it themselves in a way that's going to create value versus disruption that is going to destroy value. So I think it's the way you look at it that allows you to look at it from the perspective like, oh, what can I do with this? How can I make this a positive change for me? As somebody said, you never want to let a crisis go wasted. Never leave it.
I love that. And I love the idea of running towards disruption and actually becoming anti-fragile because of it, meaning that you're just becoming better because of it. And I think what happens in life is, I know for me, I was like that when I was younger, and then things happen to you in life or for you, however you want to spin it with a great mindset like that. You can't go wrong. But what happens when you get taken down by the game and you want to have that growth mindset and you always want to run towards disruption, but failures happen along the way. I know for me, my entrepreneurial journey has not been like that. Do you have any tips on failing forward and becoming
Sure.
anti-fragile?
Yeah, anti-fragile again is that with every bounce, you get stronger. You don't, it's not that you just break, you don't break. It's that you get stronger with every bounce. And so disruptors, every time there's a failure, instead of thinking of, well, first of all, disruptors just have a great relationship with failure. It's something I ask people, what's your relationship with failure like? And they like, oh, frankly, I try to avoid it as much as possible. Versus a disruptor would say, failure happens all the time. In fact, I don't even think about it as a negative force. And so think about it as you not achieving 100% of your goals, which is, frankly, a lot of the time. So how do you deal with that? And I talked with one leader at an organization. He says, we tried everything to get over this negative aspect of failure. We tried fail fast and fail smart, basically embrace failure, celebrate failure. And every time it'd be like, it was a miserable feeling to fail. So they decided to never fail anymore. And the way they did that is we erased the word failure. They erased and they try to acknowledge the fact that every time you do something, you will probably fall short. And so instead of thinking about it as a failure, think about it as a data point. Think about it as a way along the journey and think about how far you've come and celebrate that success. And then look at it very pragmatically and realistically and say, what do we need to close the gap? What have we learned to get to that? And every time someone would be like, well, I feel really bad. You're like, why are you feeling bad? We're better off than where we were before. So it's this ability to reframe failure, which is a key hallmark of disruptors, that you have to have a great relationship with it and think about failure in a very different way.
I mean, when you look at people like Elon Musk, Richard Branson, people like Bill Gates that are disruptors, I mean, they failed. It is never a straight shot for the big people in Silicon Valley where you are, is it?
Right. And one of the things that I love about Elon, he's quite a character, right? When SpaceX did one of its first landings, they tried to land a rocket on the platform, it completely exploded. And they cheered. Everybody cheered. They're like, this is such a great success because they learned so much about what worked and didn't work. The fact that success was defined by that rocket landing perfectly on that launch was not their definition of success. The definition of success for them was launching it and being able to learn as much as they could about what was working and what wasn't for the next flight. That was their definition of success. And they learned so much about the things that went wrong, like, oh, wow, we know so much more than what we did before this launch. So those are very
Thomas
ways to think.
Edison, right? What is that Thomas and Edison quote about finding all the ways that just 999 ways that didn't work?
Right. And then there's usually the thousandth that still may not work, but you won't know until you try it.
So to master disruption, you have to embrace failure and just realize, well, this is great. We tried it and it didn't work. Try something else. Just tweaking it. Like you don't have to throw the whole project away, do you?
No, I mean, this is where resilience comes from. And that resilience formed by a strong vision of where you want to go, knowing when you need to pivot versus when you have to persist. And that is the hardest thing if you're an entrepreneur, is trying to figure out, am I going in the right direction? Should I just persist until I can finally break through? Or is it time for a pivot? And that is the hardest thing I think that entrepreneurs have to do, is to figure out which of those two directions you want to take. Because whatever it is you're doing right now isn't working. So is it just a matter of just persisting in resilience? Or do I really need to change direction here?
Well, having a high level consultant, somebody of your caliber is a good way to know, you can't do it alone, can you? I mean, I don't think anybody got there by themselves.
Right. And so I do think that disruptors are by nature very humble. They know what they can do, what they can't do, what they know, what they don't know. And they are very good at listening. They are really constantly using their two ears and the one mouth and in the proper proportion. So listening twice as much as they are talking. And also very comfortable with giving up control, meaning that as a leader, you're not having to control everything and know all the outcomes of what everyone is doing. You really invest in the agency of people so that they can see disruption happening at the edges and bring them back into the center. This is how organizations become disruptive, is when everyone is aligned around where you want to be in the future, and we're all clear on the strategy, and everyone knows how their job is supporting that strategy and that success. Those are the three questions I ask people. Do you know what your future customer is doing? What's your strategy to get there? And does everyone know what their job is to make that strategy a success? That's alignment. And when you have alignment, it's really hard to derail you, because things may change and things may be disruptive, but you're completely aligned on what you're trying to achieve.
I love the mic drop moments in this one podcast. It's amazing to me about dealing with men. I know a lot of times relinquishing control isn't easy for power people that are just used to being in power. So knowing their zone of genius, having that growth mindset, and knowing where they need to bring in people that are better at their wheelhouse. So is that something that's easy for you to tell big leaders?
Yes, well, I basically hold a mirror up to the leaders and say, especially in my coaching work, what is it that you want to work on? And if they say, well, I'm pretty good, everyone else thinks I'm not good. So I really try to go back to the stakeholders and hold that mirror up to them to say, well, this is what your stakeholders are saying they need from you. And you may be really good in your previous job, or things may have worked really well in other circumstances, but the environment has changed for whatever reason, and you need to shift your leadership. So to be the best leader possible, what do you have to do differently to show up and be effective? And so sometimes leaders need, again, I think all leaders every person has their blind spot. And so working with people, coaches, mentors, the stakeholders across your organization to help you be the best leader you can be is one of the most important things you can do.
I just love that everybody can learn something. Like, I think learning is life. I think it's just what makes life more exciting is your focus right now on AI is something that's disrupting technology, and it's disrupting jobs, and people have that fear instead of the growth mindset. So how can we take this new technology and go to the next level and not be afraid of it, and realize that it's like, for me, I'm sitting here working by myself a lot of times. I feel like Chatty is my best friend and I talk to him.
Yeah, I use it as a thought partner. I'm like, I have this idea or I have this piece of writing. How could it be improved? I don't ask it to rewrite it for me. I just go bullet out like top ways it can be improved. And they'll say it like, well, what more information do you need to improve this? And we'll have a conversation. It's like a thought partner or ghostwriter or a fellow coder, fellow leader, somebody to help me think through a particularly knotty political situation inside an organization. Like, here are the circumstances. How do I think through this? How do I break this logjam? So it is incredibly helpful to just talk through all of these different problems and issues. And again, I find that when organizations like, well, what can you use it for? And they go, well, what are the problems that you have? And let's give it a try. Let's sit down and actually get our hands dirty and use this. And the problem that a lot of people have is like, I don't know how to use it, so I don't want to pick it up. Well, this is why that beginner's mind is such a helpful thing to say, let's get curious about this. And let's apply our critical thinking to the results we get, because it may not be perfect at first, but how can we make it better? And that hands-on use of these tools, there's no better way to describe the power of these tools than to actually get it in your hands and to try it.
I love that. And also too, not just copy and paste it blindly, because people are getting in trouble with that plagiarism thing and misinformation. So like you said, it was your idea. You asked Chat for help. It's not like you asked Chat to do the work.
Right. And again, if you think of it as somebody, a really smart college graduate who knows a lot about everything, and you can just put them to work, what would you do with them? You probably wouldn't put them on the front lines and write speeches for you and then deliver it for you, but you would ask them to do the research, to write drafts, outline things, do research for you, synthesize meeting notes. There are just so many things it can do a lot of the heavy lifting for. So when it came onto the scene a year ago, I sat down and I looked at all my different activities over a week, and about 70% of them would be done differently and much more efficiently because of ChatGPT. So, and I think that I use it all the time for so many of my tasks. But it's come with a lot of trial and error, a lot of practice, a lot of really bad generation of stuff and fine tuning with my prompts and customizations that I have it to a point where it works pretty well, and still I'm constantly experimenting. And I don't know how to code, but I'm making my own private GPTs and putting my own knowledge into that. So it writes as me and understands my voice. So there's a lot of things you can do with it right now, but you won't know what they can do for you unless you try it.
I love your ability to pivot and have a growth mindset and have all this education at the same time being curious, as you said, staying curious. And even Steve Jobs would have been a disruptor in his own way too, right? About curiosity.
Right. Again, his main thing when he came back to Apple was to think different. And by definition, being a disruptor is what Steve Jobs was all about. And he centered it so much on a very clear idea of what people wanted and needed, not what they said they wanted, but what they actually needed. It was usually unsaid that they wanted all of their music in their pockets. So nobody ever said that that was something that they wanted, but it was something that they actually needed. So this understanding of your customers' needs, of your future customer, is at the core of disruption, I believe. And it's the thing that I found consistently across organizations that we're doing this really well. And it's not just the tech companies, it's universities and art museums and retailers and financial services that are really disrupting themselves, making the changes they have to do today in order to meet the future needs of their customers. And so that alignment across their vision of what the future looks like is absolutely key to disruption.
Well, these tips are such pure gold on mastering disruption for good so that you don't get left behind in the past. Do you have any final tips you want to leave our audience on disruption?
Yeah, if you are feeling unsettled and your stomach's churning a little bit and your palms are getting a little sweaty, then you know you're doing disruption right. It is not comfortable. And it is all about the preparation that you take to prepare yourself for this journey of being disruptive and being disrupted. I think about it as, creating this disruption, getting to another space, and then centering again, getting grounded in this new reality, and then doing it again. And if you go through these cycles over and over again, and you make them faster and faster and faster, you will create a lot more disruption. The most disruptive leaders are not ones who make these huge leaps. They actually make tons of little leaps really, really quickly. And they're not constrained by the fact, well, when can we have our next meeting? Is it in 2 weeks? They say, how long will it take us to do this work? Okay, then we'll meet back in a few hours. So
Right.
when you change your cycle time for disruption, then you will be able to disrupt a lot more.
So much wonderful information, Charlene Li. I know I've been following you on LinkedIn. You have a newsletter about disruption. Where can people find more of your good stuff?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can also find me on my website, charleneli.com.
Thank you for being a fabulous guest.
Thank you for having me.